Hey, everybody. Welcome back to Therapist Theater. My name is Josh Treese, and I'm coming to you from Music City, USA, with the podcast that takes a look at relationships and mental health through the lens of movies, TV, and pop culture. This week's episode is the 10th episode of Therapist Theater, and I just wanted to take a quick second to thank everyone for listening to the show, sharing it with your friends and loved ones, and reviewing it on iTunes. Also, thanks to the therapists who have appeared on the show. It's because of your willingness to share your stories, your thoughts, and your hearts that this show is able to even exist. So, thanks, everybody. In honor of the show's 10th episode, this week's guest is a truly special one. Todd Wermers is joining me in the theater. Todd has been my best friend for 19 years, was the best man in Leigh-Ann and I's wedding, and is a therapist, pastor, and addiction specialist here in Nashville. I've been pestering him to appear on the show since it started, and this week, I finally got him. We're talking about 2003's The Last Samurai, starring Tom Cruise and Ken Watanabe. Todd has said for a long time that it's his favorite movie, and I'm sure you guys will love his take on it. Stay tuned toward the end of our discussion on the movie, because Todd and I are answering a question that one of you wrote in, which means that a future guest and I can answer your question as well. Do you have a question you'd like to ask a therapist about relationships or mental health? Or have you seen something about a relationship or mental health issue in a movie that you'd like to ask about? Send your question to therapisttheater@gmail.com. Boom. Nailed it. All right. Let's go ahead and dim the lights, raise the curtain, and start the previews. Welcome to the theater.
It's good to be here, Josh. You know, we've been trying to get this together before you ever started the podcast. I was thinking of that on my way here. I'm like, man, it's been months since you wanted to be on the show. So
That's
great
true.
to be on the show.
And we actually had 2 times scheduled for you to do it.
True.
And you had to back out. So even like putting this on today, I was like, I think Todd's gonna do it. We're gonna see. You know, I had my fingers and my toes crossed all the way. So I don't know if I've done this in a couple of episodes, but like when coming up with the idea for the show, you know, I used to get busted by Leigh-Ann about this for every episode, but like you were at the top of the list for, I mean, there, yeah. So she's in the other room and she can hear that. But in this case, it's not because like I went to school with you, well, masters. It's not because, you know, of whatever. It's because you're my best friend. You were the best man in my wedding. I've known you and been best friends with you for 19 years.
Crazy.
Which maybe I'll bleep out that number when I'm editing the thing together, because it's a identifier of how old we are.
Yeah, 2 young punks at school, man.
Yeah. So we were in our undergrad together. You got there, you just said before we started recording, spring of 2000.
Mm-hmm.
I just remember meeting you, like I was in line at the student center. I want to say at like the mail window, and you came up and started talking to somebody in front of me. I don't remember who that person was.
Probably Dave Lamb, I would imagine. That's the only person I knew.
Yeah.
Or Daniel.
Daniel McGinty? No, Barrett.
My roommate.
Yeah.
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 Right.
Yeah. And then meeting you that way, and I'm even trying to think of like what my first impression. I don't even know if I had a first impression. I think it was just, oh, there's a guy.
There's a new guy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I mean, there isn't anybody who I would say in my entire life, you know, the people that have had the most impact on my life would be, you know, and this is not in order, but like Dr. Olshine, Leigh-Ann, you, and then, you know, the list after that is just a few names.
Totally.
And so, you know, as time has gone on, I try to take every chance I can just to tell you how much I appreciate you, just because of, like, when I say I wouldn't be who I am without you, I mean, like, certainly I wouldn't live where I live, do what I do, but I think, beyond that, just who I am as a man, as a person, as a soul.
Totally.
You've had such an impact on, and in shaping that, that, to me, doing something like this show, it was I've got to have Todd on just because I love you and I respect you so much that and I even said this to Jared too, like, I couldn't imagine having anything like this without your fingerprints being on it.
Oh, that's an honor, man. It goes both ways, Josh. 19 years. Oh, I think of our times in the Bahamas together on spring break. I think of doing, ministry trips together, having you speak, processing whether to go out to Saddleback. I mean, all the things that really have shaped our lives as young men to men. There's very few that you have not had your fingerprint on my life too. So it goes both ways. I mean, and to watch how far you've come, and now colleagues. I mean, just a couple of years ago you were in school, and now we're colleagues.
Yeah, so. And I think I was telling somebody the other day, and I don't remember who it was, about this. Like, we did our undergrads together, left the undergrad program, and both became youth pastors. And then our stories continued for a while there, lost touch. You ended up going into the therapy career, which we'll get to that in a bit. Separately from that, my journey into the therapy career began. And then, so like we met at college and we're there together, left, ended up coming back to the same city doing the same thing 19 years later.
So cool.
And that is just, I mean, beyond serendipitous. That's
I believe it's totally a God thing for sure.
Yeah. I think that there's, and who knows, maybe there's people that are listening to this that are just like, geez, guys, get a room. I don't know, but
that's on them. They can have their feelings about that.
But I think that there are, and I would really genuinely hope that everybody gets this. But I just think there's certain people that come into your life that it's a chosen family thing.
Totally. Which I think we'll hit on some of that in the movie we picked.
Yeah,
for sure.
Yeah. And I just, I don't even know if I could say that you're my chosen family. I know that it's a God. I look at it more as like a gift, like God gave me a gift in having you in my life. And so I'm just so glad that you're here.
Yeah. It's an honor, man.
So, I like to ask everybody when they get here, and this is really just as a way to let the listeners just kind of get to know who's sitting in the theater with me. But like, why therapy? Like, how did you arrive at this career?
Well, I mean, as most therapists, we probably come into therapy because we've gone through therapy on our own to some extent. So that was for me 8 years ago. My addiction to pornography kind of hit the fan at my house. My wife, Jenny, found it. We had been married just over 3 years. So we were pretty new in marriage, just gotten a new role at the church, and finally the secrets of middle school, high school, college, and beyond kind of was exposed. And by the grace of God and Jenny, her love for me and my church, they sent me to rehab in Nashville. So I went through 3 months of treatment at a place called Center for Professional Excellence, and got out of treatment, and for 2 years or so was just cutting grass at the church that fired me.
Literally?
Yeah, literally pushing a lawn. My boss wouldn't let me do the ride lawnmower, so he made me do the push mower and all the weed whacking.
So they had a riding lawnmower?
Oh, yeah. Just I was not allowed to be on it.
Okay.
That was the boss's job. And one of our clients was the church that fired me. So every Friday morning for 4 hours, I would cut 10 acres of land and weed whack and pull weeds and in the hot Florida sun. And so during that time, just the provision of God, really, people that were close to me, my mentors, Jenny, said, "And you've got to go back to school. And it really looks like you got a gift in counseling." At that time at the church, I had started being an intern again with all the college students who I was the college pastor when I got fired. So it was me at 30 with all these 18, 19, 20-year-old guys and girls. And just during that season of our church at that time, a number of people were coming to the elders and the pastors needing help for addiction, whether it was alcohol, drugs, sex addiction. And it was just an overwhelmingness for the elders. And they had known my story, and they started inviting me to lunch with these men. And so I'd sit down and just kind of walk them through my story and how, I'd found hope and freedom from pornography.
So not even necessarily, you weren't counseling them. You were more just saying, here's what I've been through.
Yeah, here's my experience, strength, and hope.
Okay.
Yeah, so I'd tell them about, going to, I think at the time, I was still going to 4 meetings a day, a week.
Now, when you say meetings?
Going to SA meetings, Sexaholics Anonymous meetings.
Which is a 12-step program.
That's right.
For, okay.
Yeah. And that was what the rehab center was, a 12-step treatment place. So based out of that, they just kept coming and inviting me to lunch, and basically got to this place of like, you're taking me away from my job that's paying. I love doing this. So they offered me a job as an intern, 10 hours a week. That turned to 20 hours a week. Well, one of the things I was doing during cutting the grass was listening to podcasts. And there was a pastor out of Dallas that kept talking about their recovery ministry. And so I flew out to Dallas and met with their church, the Village Church. And at the end of the 3-4 days we were out there, they slid us all their material and went back to the church, started a recovery ministry with 12 people. And that was going really well. And then but that was also bringing a lot of people that need help. And at that time, they had restored me back into full-time ministry. And so I was doing a lot of counseling as a pastor, but felt very limited of what I could offer people. And just felt like had too much knowledge and I was too dangerous without an education. And so my mentors, my elders, and Jenny said, go back to school. So
you had all of this potential in you from your own experience. You just needed to know how to hone it and use it correctly.
That's right.
Okay.
Yeah, I had the tools, but didn't know how to use the tools properly. Probably the best way to put it. Like, you walk into a shed and you see tools, and I'm like, man, I think you can use that for wood, but...
Yeah, you don't want to put a chainsaw in a 10-year-old's hands.
No.
You got to teach them.
That's right.
Well, in this metaphor, it's probably still dangerous.
That's right. Yeah,
that's
right. So I just knew, I just had enough in me to know, man, I need more. And so at that time, I was living in Fort Myers, Florida, and I would either have to have gone to the East Coast to school or up the coast to Tampa, which was about 2.5 hours in both directions. And I was like, man, I don't want to drive all over the state of Florida to go to school. So I did a better thing. I flew every weekend to Nashville from Fort Myers.
So
36 times a year.
For how many years?
3 years.
Huh. So you decided instead of driving 2 hours, how long was that flight?
I don't even remember. It was always a layover in Atlanta, so it was probably, yeah.
So we're talking probably at least 4 hours.
Shout out the Delta.
Yeah.
Well, the goal was to sell our house, move to Nashville.
Okay.
But that was in 08, 09 when the bottom fell out.
Yeah.
And so we were
I remember
down.
sometime, it may have been when we were at the beach one time, but I remember you telling this story, and then I said something like, did you just have a million frequent flyer miles that you were able to do this? Like, how did you end up paying for all this? And like next to you on the couch, Jenny just like slyly kind of raised her hand.
Yeah. She did. Yeah, Jenny, God's blessed her with a great job. And so she really did. She believed in me. It was the first person in my life that really believed in me and was going to put some stake in the game with me. And so she did. She we took out tons of loans, but she did flip the bill and
Yeah.
Was super supportive, like never complained about going back to school. And yeah, the whole 3 years.
Wow.
So
Not to
basically,
mention,
we had a month off at the summer and a month off at Christmas.
yeah, we usually get August and December off. Plus, not to mention the times that you'd have to be away for the weekend. Now, where in all of that was like your daughter? Like, did you guys already have your daughter?
No, she was halfway through the program. Tennyson was born
halfway through. She was born.
That's right.
Okay.
Something like that. February of...
Okay. So it wasn't like you were away from your wife and daughter at the beginning.
No. But
Although wow, so you had to leave your newborn daughter at some point.
Yeah, so she was born middle of the week. I took that first weekend off, and then flew the very next weekend. It was the only class that I got a B, is the class that Tennyson was born in.
What class was that?
Statistics.
Statistics.
Wow. Yeah. Got a B plus.
Wow.
I had missed a exam, but I had to make it up, but I missed 2 weeks.
But would you say that like 100% of Todd's were happy with his decision?
Yeah. Yeah.
Statistical joke there.
That's right. I saw what you did there.
Terrible. So
Yeah.
you decided to go back to school. Now, I'm curious, you said that a couple of people back at your church noticed that you had something in you that needed to get honed. How were they seeing that? Was it just in your meetings with these guys over lunch that they just kind of clocked you? And
Yeah, so they were watching me at lunch, and then there was a young college guy who had come and kind of confessed his story and what was going on in his life, and he was leading a small group on the campus, and so he asked me if I would lead his small group with him, and so I did a discipleship group, but that's when we started diving into each other's stories, and that's when I knew, man, I'm getting over my head, and I could be more harm than good.
yeah.
So the elders kind of were watching that, but those men, out of the 12, I think 9 of them now are in full-time ministry somewhere.
Of that college group? Wow.
And they would all point back to
that group. So what was it that made you say Trevecca? Like, what was it that made you go Nashville instead of Tampa? Or
Well, that's because Nashville, I called the rehab center. My goal was to come back to Nashville, move to Nashville, go to school at Trevecca, and then go work at CPE with Dr. Chip Dodd and Phil Herndon, who are still both there. And so they recommend to go to Trevecca. So that's why I chose Trevecca. I didn't look anywhere else.
yeah, which Chip Dodd, author of Voice of the Heart.
That's right.
Two episodes ago, we mentioned that with when Chris Murphy was here, and even put up a link to it on the show's Twitter at Therapist Theater.
Great book.
Yeah, and I would say, gosh, and I don't know if it's because Chip's in Nashville, we're in Nashville. I've just met so many people that have been impacted by it. I know for me, and this goes back to what we were saying earlier, the impact that you've had on me. When I first started in therapy as a client, you recommended that book like straight away. And so, I mean, for me as a person who was a client in therapy, it became my kind of base language kind of understanding. I've carried that with me all the way through to where now I use it with my clients as a base. And I know so many other people. Chris Murphy talked about it when he was on as well. It became his base as a person, and then he's carrying it with him into his clients.
That's right.
So you had a relationship with Chip and Phil through rehab. You called them up. You said,
Yeah,
hey.
I'd stayed close with Phil in particular, but I had Chip down to do a men's gathering. So I'd stayed close with Chip, but really close with Phil. So I called them and said, look, this is my desire. And I'd gone through treatment with a guy. And so our goal was both of us to go to school together at Trevecca. And the hope was to plant a CPE satellite back in Fort Myers.
Oh.
And just through circumstances, my buddy ended up not going to school. And so I was kind of left holding the pieces, like, what am I going to do?
Yeah.
So
Nice. And then when it came time for me to pick a school to go to, I called you.
So Trevecca.
Where do I go? You said Trevecca. I asked my therapist where to go. He named a school in St. Louis, Covenant Seminary. So I flew out to Covenant. I flew up to Trevecca. I checked them both out. But in the end, I had people here already, which was you.
Yeah.
And so I was like, it's always easier to move where there's people
Totally.
that you already have. So
Always.
relationship, brought me here.
Yep.
So you went through the program at Trevecca, and then what next?
Yeah, so I was back on staff, full-time, part-time at church.
So you went back down to Florida.
Yeah, I was still living in Florida, had graduated, had began having a conversation with both the church about coming on full-time with them. And at that same time, Chip Dodd called me and said, hey, we got a position at CPE. And so I had enough awareness to know I had some things that happened in my internship that were not great. And so I just knew, man, I need to go put what I've learned over these last 3 years in practice with two guys in the field that I really, really trust. And it was a really long, it took me about 8 months. So
wow,
to come to that decision. I love the church. I love the local church. And so my goal was to come up to CPE, work for a year, and go back to Florida.
So you kind of looked at it as there's a few skills I still need to sharpen.
Totally.
Okay. So you were like, I'm going to come up, get a little more, I think what I'm hearing you say about the internship is, and I had a similar experience in my practicum, but I think back to like my undergrad, the internship I did there, very similar experience, where you end up learning kind of what you don't want to do.
Yeah, that's right.
And so you kind of wanted something where you'd learn what you did want to do.
That's right.
Okay.
Yep. So in August of 2012, I think that's right, I made the decision to come to Nashville to work at CPE. So moved here in September. First day was October 1st.
Wow.
And was with CPE on a third of a time basis for a good 5.5 years until last spring. I left CPE and now work for Men of Valor. It's a ministry for guys coming out of the prison that we, kind of help do re-entry stuff. And I know you had Jared. Jared works with me as well. And so we do process groups. We do voice to heart groups. We do individual stuff just to help guys learn their story, know their story as they enter back into society. So,
and that's one of your jobs.
Yeah.
Which,
three jobs.
We haven't really on the show yet kind of brought the faith element in a ton, but you're also a pastor of a church.
That's right. So senior pastor of a church in Murfreesboro called Palace Chapel Baptist Church. Been there 4 years.
Are you serious?
4 years, yeah. I'll be 5 years.
Oh my gosh, you're right. I mean, I was there the Sunday you got voted in.
That's
I
right.
just do not remember it being that long ago.
4 years ago.
Wow.
Crazy.
I feel like we could do an entire show on this, but I'll just ask a little bit. How do you feel like your clinical training impacts your work at a church, and the opposite? How do you feel like your work at a church impacts your clinical training or your clinical practice, I guess?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a great question. It's easier at the church because when, the congregation comes for counseling, I just say, share the Bible, share the gospel, share the truth. It's helped me as a clinician in, what we'd call the secular world to tap into my creative gift that I feel God's given to me, to be more creative and like exploratory in story and have them, the easiest part of my own story is, when you tell people you're 10 years sober, which I am, that's big in the essay world. A lot of guys don't get to the 10-year mark. And so people will often say, well, how'd you do it? There's only one way I did it. And that's through surrendering to Jesus Christ. And so I'm able to say that because once they ask that question,
Yeah.
I just can kind of tell them.
And
but for those who
that's
don't,
mainly because there's ethics involved, and
That's
like
right.
in a clinical world, you can't really just bring out.
that's right.
I guess you can't bring out your faith. You can bring up faith, just because there's so many research studies that talk about how, if a person has a faith, that it improves their mental health, it improves
right.
their quality of living. But when you get specific, the ethics kind of say, no to that.
Yeah. Yeah, so that's how, just being real creative and, people, it's not hard to know I'm a pastor. That's some of the very first questions clients will ask. What do you do? Well, this is my 3 jobs. So, and then I work for a ministry here in Nashville called 10 Man Ministries, and just do whatever they need me to do. So, yeah, do a little bit of everything.
Wow. And there was a point in time where I was trying to talk you into narrowing it down to just one job.
Yeah,
I think you had it at 2 for a while.
I
though,
did.
Right?
I did.
Okay.
I had it too.
Yeah, I don't know if I knew that you were doing the 10-man thing.
I just started that not too long ago. Once I left CPE, so in the last 8 months or so.
Yeah. Okay.
But that's maybe 10 hours a week. It's not a ton.
So let's talk about the movie that you picked. So I gotta say, I shouldn't have been surprised at what you picked, because I've known forever that it was your favorite movie.
Favorite movie of all time.
Yeah. So what movie did you bring today?
Last Samurai. So all of my close friends give me the hardest time, so I'm shocked you haven't given me a hard time about it, because everyone knows it as my least favorite actor is Tom Cruise.
Why is he your least favorite actor?
I don't know. Just the stigma of Tom Cruise, and I don't know. I just don't enjoy him.
You don't enjoy him?
Nah, not really.
Is it
I think
because
I
of
don't
the stuff
enjoy
he
him
does
off camera?
I was gonna say, is it the stuff he does off camera?
I'm pretty sure that's what it is.
Or I should say, out of a movie, because he's still on camera. Otherwise, we wouldn't know about it.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah, when he's not in character, when he's Tom Cruise, the man, I'm like, eh.
You know what would have been great is if, there's no way this could happen, but if we could have recorded this at the Scientology Center in Nashville, and we could have swung it to where he could have joined us.
That would have been awesome, for sure.
I got this feeling like he would be either super cool to meet or a giant drag, because he strikes me as the kind of person that, like, off camera is the most serious person in the world.
Yeah, me too. Big time.
Which, like, I find for me is always a little tough, because I might be one of the least serious people around.
Same here.
So Last Samurai.
Love the movie still.
Yeah.
Love the movie.
Top 5 for you?
No, top 1.
Top
it is
1.
the best movie all time. I'm not sure anymore if that's just nostalgia. It's the only movie that I can remember that I went to, I think, and Jen could tell you this, I believe I went to a Friday night showing, a Saturday showing, and then a third showing. But I went back-to-back nights for sure. So the first night I saw it, I was like, I got to go back and see it
So
again.
I'm gonna bring this up, although I'm looking at what year it came out, so I know it's not the same thing. But you used to give me so much trouble for doing that when we were in school, because when the Count of Monte Cristo came out, I think I saw it 4 times over one weekend. And you gave me trouble for it. Dr. Olstein gave me trouble for it. Now, full disclosure, that was like the weekend before finals one year. So,
I would've done that too.
I was like the worst student in the world. So, like, at that time, so, totally terrible timing to choose that. But you saw it, you went back. So you grabbed onto it like right when you first saw it.
Yeah, I think it was the opening weekend.
Do you remember what year it came out? I got it right here.
2003.
Yes, which I can't believe this is a 16-year-old movie. Totally holds up. Before you came over, I read Ken Watanabe that's in it, that plays, I just forgot his character's name.
The Last Samurai.
Yeah, Katsumoto. He plays him. Not only was this his first American movie, it was the first English-speaking role that he had had.
Huh.
And then, of course, he went on to be in Batman Begins and
That's right.
Godzilla and, all these other things. Here's what I'm wondering though is, 2003, you're 10 years sober, so you weren't quite there yet. What was it about this movie when you saw it that grabbed you so hard?
I think it has a lot to do with my story, right? So family for me is a big deal. And coming from a very dysfunctional family, like I could really relate to Tom Cruise in that way. I don't think I would have known addiction in 2003. Not the way I do now. So hindsight's 2020, right? But what he grabbed onto when he went to that village, I was like, my heart has always longed for that.
So you saw something that you didn't have that you wanted.
Oh, big time.
Yeah.
Big time. Yeah. So yeah, watching that, seeing that, I think, yeah. And then the way the woman, the sister of, well, he killed I mean, I don't know if I'm supposed to like ruin the movie for people.
Yeah.
If you
So
haven't seen
like,
the movie yet,
here's something that
that's ridiculous.
I was talking with somebody that listens to the show, and they said, "Hey, can I give you some feedback on something?" And I said, "Yeah, sure." And I'm thinking like, audio quality or something like that. And they said, for the Arrival episode, like I really want to watch that movie, so I'm not going to listen to it yet. You should put out like a spoiler warning or something. And I said, well, I kind of feel like if you're listening to this, because of the nature of what we're doing, there's going to be spoilers. But just in case maybe you're new to the show, this is the first episode, like at this point moving forward, we're in spoiler territory. So if you haven't seen The Last Samurai, hit pause, get on iTunes and rent it, and then come back and hit play.
I think if you haven't seen it yet, like this is on you. Like,
there's a statute of limitations on spoilers.
Come on, 2003.
Yeah,
like
that's 16 years.
Yeah,
I think
that's a long time. But this isn't a spoiler alert. Like,
well, we're gonna have spoilers. I mean, we're gonna talk spoilers.
Oh,
so
okay.
I'd say this is the line where if you've gotten this far, you've been safe. It's not safe past here.
Yeah, that's a good. I think the way that lady cared for him, even though she didn't want to care for him, stood out to me.
Yeah. That's interesting. So was it that you wanted to be cared for even by did you have people that you felt like didn't want you that you wanted to care for you?
Oh, yeah, big time.
Okay.
Yeah, that's a big part of my story. So I was abandoned in the airport at 15 years old by my parents. So that has, when I look back over my journey of that's kind of the linchpin. Yeah. So that's a huge abandonment in my story is huge. And so always wanting to be a part of something. I think that's what drew me to counseling too, is wanting to help people connect and learn how to connect. I often tell people, I'm like, before recovery, I was like worn out Velcro, like made for connection. I still to this day carry yeah, exactly. I still carry a Velcro wallet. And so when the Velcro on my wallet gets old, it no longer attaches.
Yeah.
Right. And that's what I felt like. Like I'm meant to attach to something, but like I must be broken because I can't attach to anyone. Jenny would tell you, she would say, you're a man of 1,000 friends with no friends at all. And she told me that even before all my addiction stuff came out. She's like, everyone's your best friend. Like, how's that possible? And yet nobody knows you. And she's got enough awareness to then and now to pick up on that. So I think even in our friendship, like there was some attachment, but it was like, I wasn't going to go a whole lot of places.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I would say, for somebody who was, I don't even know if fighting addiction would be the right term at that point in time, but certainly living with addiction.
Yeah, totally.
To not be able to form healthy emotional attachments, that is par for the course. That's the very definition of addiction.
Yeah. And he says that in the movie near the end. If you catch it, he talks about that when he's writing in his journal.
Yeah.
He talks about wanting to connect, wanting a family.
Mm-hmm.
I don't have a word for word, but you know, and he is an act. That's the thing. Like,
Yeah.
the very opening scene is, you know,
Mm-hmm.
him trashed out of his mind, getting ready to go up on stage. And
Well, it's a good place for us to say, like, if you could give a brief, like, summary of the story of this movie, what would it be?
I think a man learning about himself and learning his passions and what he desires out of life.
It's much more brief than I thought you were going to give, but that'll work because I think that that is certainly the theme of it. And
You want like a movie, like you want me to synopsize the movie, or like?
Yeah, I mean, you know, well, I mean, we'll get to that because we'll certainly talk about different scenes. But, you know, I think, you know, just kind of what you said about learning himself and his passions and connecting with life, you know, that can tie back into Voice of the Heart. That can tie into your clinical work. That can certainly tie into your faith work. And I would say, you know, one of the biggest reasons now of all of the several times that I tried to get you on here, every time I said, hey, do you have an idea for a movie? You'd always say, what do you want me to do? And I would say, that's not how this works. You know, it works better if the guest picks the movie because that way it's born out of your passion, out of your story, out of your specialty. And so I think, you know, for you to describe it that way says something about your story.
Totally. Well, there's a reason behind like wanting you to, because I knew the movie, but I'm like, man, no one's gonna want to watch or care about. Like Last Samurai wasn't a cool movie. Like no one talks about it, right? And so I was like,
Maybe not today, but they certainly did back then.
you think so?
Oh yeah.
Oh, that's good to
I
hear.
mean, the last episode we did was on Terms of Endearment, and that, you know, that's a movie from 1983. So, you know.
Yeah.
And that's the other thing is like, and I don't know if any listeners are having this experience too, but there's every single one of these movies, as I watch it, if I finish watching the movie and I'm not a big fan of it, by the time I get done talking to the person that's here as a guest, I'm a giant fan of it. And it's 100% because when you talk to somebody about what they love, it's really tough to not walk away loving it too.
I feel like a jerk if you walk away like, that's still a stupid movie.
Yeah, I still hated it. Like, no, I think, yeah. So what was it? I mean, I guess that answered the question, but like, what was it that made you pick this movie for this?
Well, it's what I'm in the realm of counseling. I'm passionate about addiction.
Mm-hmm.
I'm passionate about attachment. And I'm passionate about helping men know who they were created to be so they can go and be what they were created to do.
Mm-hmm.
And I think this movie kind of shows that. Because he's a warrior. Like, there's something about the character. He loves war. And though he's got PTSD, and you can see that throughout, like, there's still this rough warrior mentality about him that he couldn't suppress and wasn't going to suppress, but just had to have a healthy outlet of like, how's that?
Do you think that that's his true self, or do you think that that is him not as his true self, just what his experience was, and then once he encountered his true self, he found a way to use what he had in his true self with the connection that he made?
Yeah, I think he got taken advantage of. Like the American army took advantage of his talents. I'll put it that way.
Mm-hmm.
Right? He had to be talented.
They looked at him as a weapon and they pointed him in a direction.
That's right. And they looked at him as a mind that could read a battlefield. You see that in the movie too. I mean, that's the whole reason he ends up going to Japan, because he's a brilliant mind when it comes to strategy and to war and how to train. Mm-hmm. So, you know, I think that's I think that's in him. I don't think that was put in him. I think that's, you know, my opinion would be a God-given talent that was, you know, robbed by the American, you know, at that time in the movie, it's the 1800s. So, you know, America's fighting the Indians, and he was forced to do things that his gut told him was wrong, but he was put in a place that said, you know, aim, fire, shoot this direction, and whoever gets killed, but this is where we're going to go. Mm-hmm. So I don't think he was allowed to experience his passion within his gifting.
Say more about that. He wasn't allowed to experience his passion within his gifting. How are you defining passion? How are you defining gifting?
Well, gifting, I believe, is we're created. God created us with gifts.
Okay.
Like all of us on this planet.
Do we all have the same gifts?
No.
Okay.
No way. Like
So-
I'm not gifted. You know, I can never go onto a football field and be a pro athlete. I don't have those gifts and abilities.
Okay. So gifts could be a personal thing.
That's right.
You may have a set of gifts. I may have a set of gifts. So then what would passion be?
Whatever drives us within our gifting, whatever we're angry for, desire. You know, again, if you read The Voice of the Heart, you'll understand what passion is.
Okay.
It's what we set our heart to, our minds to.
Mm-hmm. I explain it to my clients, and I always, when I'm trying to explain the concept of the 8 feelings and impairments and gifts, I always use anger as the example. And I say, you know, if the feelings are an alert that goes off in your heart to tell you something's going on you have to pay attention to, anger is the alert that says, I see something that I believe is wrong. And then the gifting of anger, and I use this because I feel like the gift and the impairment of anger are so directional. So the gifting of anger is passion, and it's a direction flowing out of you. And it's, I see something that I believe is wrong, and I'm driven to change it. And the impairment of anger, instead of, you know, an outward direction, it's an inward direction, because the impairment of anger is depression, and it's anger turned inward.
Yeah, it's a depression.
Yeah. And so
depressing
a lot of
something in
times
you.
the way that I explain it to clients is, you know, you see something you believe is wrong, and when you try to hold back your anger, maybe the message that you're telling yourself at the time is, well, you know, what would it matter if I did anything? You know, nothing that I do would matter. And then if you keep pressing that down, pretty soon, nothing that I would do would matter turns into, well, I don't matter.
That's right.
And then there you are at depression. And so,
And I think you see that in the movie. I think that opening scene is him experiencing his depression, and he's depressing it with alcohol.
yeah. Which he is in like a Old West kind of town, and he's basically being like a spokesperson for a kind of rifle.
That's right, a new rifle that's coming out.
And so he's, you know, kind of acting like a barker, you know, ladies and gentlemen, you know, when I was on the battlefield, you know, I would see something going on and I would immediately reach for this brand of rifle.
That's right.
You know, but, you know, he's drunk, and I think it shows up at the very beginning. He has PTSD, and he just keeps having these like flashbacks to the things that he saw in war.
Big time.
And
He's got this self-loathing about what he did on the battlefield. And I think that's what that's the PTSD part. And that's also he's depressing. Like, you know, he killed innocent children. And you see that in one of the flashbacks. He's talking to his commander about, you know, these people are innocent. They haven't done anything. And then he says, the commander says, wipe them all out. And then that's where you see bits and pieces of just bodies going everywhere.
Yeah. There's a scene a little bit later on, and I was thinking about this and wanting to ask you. He's already been captured by the samurai, which, I mean, this is definitely a movie and especially a conversation with you that I feel like, you know, we could have a 10-hour episode on. So I know that we're not going to be able to hit everything. But after he's been captured, he is waking up. He's on the floor, and he's kind of like shaking and sweating, and he's yelling out for sake. He wants something to drink. Right. And as we were watching it, Leigh-Ann was like, oh, is he going through the DTs? And I said, well, I don't know, because he was also stabbed. So, I mean, I don't know, like, what of that is him, like, suffering from his injury, and what of that is him detoxing?
I would say it's primarily DTs, detoxing for sure.
Yeah, which maybe it's...
Because you hear what he goes for. He's still craving the alcohol.
Yeah. Well, and it could be, as well as the physical injury that he's suffering from, you know, he's also still having the PTSD stuff. And so he's trying to numb the emotion and the memory while at the same time probably numbing the physical too.
Yeah.
Because there's certainly, you know, when somebody who is in addiction, you know, not every trigger. Well, no, I will. Yeah, there are physical things that can happen that cause emotional triggers.
Oh, big time.
So even the stabbing, it's probably making him feel afraid and making him feel sad and making him maybe even feel shame that he, because a big theme in the movie is honor. And when, these older samurais suffer a defeat, they kill themselves because they can't deal with the dishonor. So maybe there's even shame in him that he was able to be captured in that battle, and his, sergeant friend died in that battle, and he saw that, and
Yeah, a guy that believed in him.
yeah,
Yeah.
even enough to follow him.
Yeah, Irish guy, right?
Yeah, real life, his name's Billy Connolly. But so in that part, he's kind of deep.
His name's Bob in the movie.
Yeah, no, Bob was the guy.
Bob, he named him Bob, and then he named the other guy
Bob,
that was
yeah.
walking around this village with him, Bob.
That guy ended up dying protecting him in the end.
That's right.
So I didn't hear this from you, but I heard it from Jared. And I'll say this too. I was thinking this a few minutes ago. I was a little bit nervous to have on another movie talking about addiction because with Jared talking about Warrior, with Chris talking about A Star Is Born, and now Last Samurai. But then in the end, I was like, well, it's my specialty and my practice, and it's the people that I'm having on. It's just the way the chips are falling. And I mean, we're in Nashville, and it's one of the addiction recovery capitals. So I mean, it's kind of a little bit tough to avoid. But
I think too, I think that's a misnomer. I think everyone on the planet is addicted to something.
Yeah, I was going to say
right?
that too. I feel like there's so much about work with addiction that people want to categorize themselves out of, but there's so many things that apply across the board because you could use the word addiction, you could use the word dependence, you could use the word attachment. Yeah, I mean,
Christians call it idolatry.
Yeah, but whatever language you're using around it to make the goal to lessen your dependence on something else from the effort to run away from your feelings and your true self. That's the work.
Which is every client that comes to see us.
Yeah, and it's every person on the planet too.
Chip would say this all the time. He said there's 3 types of people in the world: addicts, those in recovery, and genetic mutants, those that can't.
Yeah. Well, I remember there was one time where I don't even remember what I was thinking or going through at the time, but I remember calling you up and just being so frustrated that my feelings were getting the best of me and I couldn't even maybe figure out what I was feeling and just needing help processing. And I remember asking you, is there anybody, or maybe I was with you because you did emotion, but is there anybody that this comes natural to that just gets it right? And you just kind of motioned over to your 3-year-old daughter and you were like, her. And I was like, what? And you're like, yeah, when she's sad, she cries, she says it. When she's angry, she is really comfortable expressing her anger. When she's happy, she, gets up and twirls around and it's just, it's parents, it's the world, it's people that kind of grinds that out of a kid. And, you think to all of the times where, any parent super unintentionally will say stuff like, don't be sad, or stuff like that. And you just think, gosh, how many of us as adults, if we would have had somebody that really just leaned in, hey, it seems like you're feeling sad right now. Can you tell me what you're feeling sad about? Which
the actor, the character does that. Tom Cruise does that with the boy.
Yes,
right?
That's the scene that sticks in my mind the most from just finishing up watching it was seeing that.
Yeah, at the very, he's about to go back to war. He had already lost his dad in war, and there's that interchange between the lady that's been taking care of him, probably his love interest at this point.
Which I gotta say, super weird. Hey, I killed your husband. But here I am, and now
we're falling in love. Kind of awkward. But I think that's what I love to, again, that's what makes the movie so great.
Although there's probably some symbolism there because they did say a samurai believes that his sword is his soul, and then he ends up getting the husband's sword.
That's right.
So,
and his armor.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that scene where, he kind of is, the little boy is running off and, they have that interchange, and he basically, he's angry because I'm the one that put him in this position to have no dad. And the mom says, no, he's sad and angry that you won't come back too. Mm-hmm. Right. And then he just goes outside, and they have some exchange, but it's not a suppression of the boy's feelings. Mm-hmm. It's a true, like, no, I'm scared to go into war too. And I'm scared like Tom Cruise really gets honest about his own feelings with the boy and validates the boy's feelings. And then there's that sweet embrace with tears. And
the boy says something about, he could never go, the boy saying this about himself, he could never go into battle because he would be too scared. And then Tom Cruise said, I would be scared too. And he said, but you've been in so many battles. And he said, I was scared in every one of them. And it reminds me of, and this is something that it's a story beat that I use all the time in sessions. And it's from, Game of Thrones, the very first episode of the TV show, but also the first book. And it's this scene between Ned Stark and his son where, Ned had to execute this guy that ran away from the wall. It's this, job that you get if you're a criminal or something. You go guard the wall, and that's your job, and you can't leave, and that's where you are for the rest of your life. And so if you run away, it's not mutiny, treason, something like that, where penalty's death. So this guy runs away. Ned, being the lord of the land, believes if you pass the sentence, you should swing the sword. So he beheads the guy, and then he and his son are sitting on horses, and they're talking, and he says, Ned says to his son, do you understand why I had to do that? And he said, yeah, he broke his vow, that kind of thing. And he said he seemed really, scared. And he said, it's a scary job. And then his son said, well, you've been in all these battles, but you were so brave. He's like, I could never be, that brave because I'm so scared. And Ned says, well, that's just the thing. It's impossible to be brave without being scared. And I mean, that's just something that stuck with me so much. And I felt the same thing watching that scene. It was Tom Cruise saying to that boy, what looks to you like the absence of fear isn't the absence of fear. It's the full recognition of the fear and the still choosing to act.
Yeah, that's right.
And not in a foolhardy way, but just in a, this is what I believe I should do, and I am afraid, but I will still do it.
Yeah, one of my mentors always says, fear prepares us for battle, and anger takes us to battle. Mm-hmm. So we have to have fear going into battle. We'd be foolish. Mm-hmm. But it's our anger is what we're fighting for and to protect. And that's really the essence of the story. Like, Tom Cruise finally found something to fight for. Mm-hmm. And that was the way of the samurai, the village, those
honor.
People that, honor, the people that cared for him when he couldn't care for himself, and that loved him. And really, there's so many corollaries with 12 steps throughout the whole thing. Step one is in the beginning. Like, he's finally come to a place of powerlessness, right? And then he's taken to the village, and he learns. He says it. There's I've never really gone to church, but I found something very spiritual here. Mm-hmm. Is what he says. If you remember that scene, it's a cut scene in it's him talking as he's writing in his journal, and I'm like, and that's step two. Like, he's finally found something.
Believe that there's a higher power.
That's right.
Yeah.
So
what's believe that there's a higher power that can save you from?
It's step one is we admit that we're powerless over our life, and our lives to become manageable. Step two is we came to believe in a power greater than ourselves that could restore us to sanity. Yeah. Step three is we've turned our will and our life over to the care of God as we understand God.
Mm-hmm. Going back just a second, we were talking so much about fear, talking about the 8 feelings and gifts and impairments. The gift of fear is wisdom and faith. And so that seems to me like it would be such an advantage to have that going into battle. Like, to have somebody going into battle who, without that fear, which would give you that wisdom, seems to me like it would be more out of, and then having that wisdom coming from fear, which would lead into the anger and the passion. To not have that, it seems like it would almost have to be rage that was taking
That's
you
right.
in there,
Have to be rage.
which I've oftentimes, when I'm talking about the difference, what's the difference between anger and rage? I always tell people, well, it's presence of thought. Like if you have anger and you lean into it and understand it and allow it to turn into passion, it's because you've understood why you're angry and you've understood your place in having agency to change what you believe is wrong. With rage, even though a lot of people think it looks like anger, there's zero thought. It's all
right.
reaction.
That's right.
So if you think about the animal that's backed up into the corner and lashes out in order to protect itself, it's not thinking, can I win this fight? It's just,
Can I survive?
lower brain has taken over and it's a fight or flight thing, and it's, I'm going to die. So here we go. Even if it's that much thought, I mean, so he gets taken in by this village, and at the beginning of that experience, total fish out of water, just trying to understand why in the world he's here. And he ends up walking up to Katsumoto and just trying to figure out, why do you have me here? And I'm sure, well, it looks that way in the movie. I mean, frustrates him because he just basically asks him, like, what's your name? And just begins to have a conversation with him that seems so cordial and polite.
So true.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think, well, even Katsumoto says, he said, I don't know what he's talking to his sister, who is caring for. He said, I don't know what he's here for, but he's here for a reason. And so it's our job to, whatever reasons he's here, it's our job to take care of him. And I think, again, that's one of those parts in the movie that I'm like, man, like, here's a guy he just killed his brother-in-law, right? Like, and yet there's something in him that says, no, there's a reason he's here. There's a reason and so even Katsumoto saw something in Tom Cruise that nobody saw, and believed in that, and said, we'll figure it out along the way. And I think for me in my own story, it's like what I said earlier, like Jenny was the first person in my life that can really look at and believed in me, like helped me go through school and paid for all that money. And like, man, here's a woman that really believed in me when I didn't believe myself, when I didn't see other people believing in me, or couldn't, in my, impairments, couldn't see it, wasn't able to see it. So yeah, I think somebody believing in Tom Cruise's character gave him some hope, gave him some passion.
Which is such a, I mean, I don't even know if gift is the right word. And I know for a fact not everybody gets that kind of person. It's my deepest hope and desire and prayer that everybody would, sometimes I think people have to be that for themselves.
I think that's the special part of AA, SA, NA.
Yeah.
That's the sponsorship role. Like, a sponsor really is, they see something in that person and believe in that person.
Well, and I would even say, and I've said this to clients before, I think the greatest thing that a 12-step program gives to somebody isn't the structure of sobriety, it's the community. Because, there was a part in, have you seen A Star Is Born?
Mm-hmm.
So there's a part in that where, he goes off to rehab, and he not only gets dry, but he gets sober. And I've oftentimes said that, when you're in recovery and you're sober, you have your quote unquote program, your tools for dealing with your cravings, for dealing with your triggers, for staying sober. And your ability to deal with those things is equal to the amount of practice you've had in using those tools. But there's always going to be some stressor, some situation that comes in that is greater than your ability to deal with it.
That's right.
And when you encounter those things that are greater than your ability to deal with it, that's when you look towards your community in your 12-step program. And that's what the phone calls are for, because it's, basically saying, I don't have what it takes to deal with this. Can I borrow what you have?
That's right.
And so I think, the greatest gift that 12 Steps gives a person is the community of people who are also living the story, who are also walking the road, because they're not just there with you because they think they should. they're not just there with you in spirit, they're not just there with you in empathy, but they're there with you in experience, and they're there with you in passion. Yeah.
Right. There's like they come back to Tokyo, and they had just gone to the emperor, right? They arrest the samurai, and then he's in his room and he relapsed. If you remember that.
Yeah.
He drank 2 shots of whiskey, but then he has that epiphany, that awakening of like, wait, this is like, man, this is my community. I've got to do something for my community. And I think that's what, emotionally sobers him up, is his community and what he's about to lose. And that's where he goes back. And
We'll talk about passion. I mean, that is his, not just I'm angry about what's happening, but I can have an effect. I can act to make it right.
That's right. And that's what takes him out of the room into that sweet battle scene where it's like those guys, 6 guys coming on him and trashes all of them, and then goes and rescues.
He's got the double swords.
Yeah,
so cool.
It is. I wish I could do that. But I can't.
So would you say that that's the point in the movie where he has a shift in his identity?
Yeah. Oh, yes.
Do you think that for a person who's dealing with an addiction, or like we said before, a sin, a dependence, an attachment, do you think there always has to be a shift in identity?
Yeah. Yes.
What is that shift in identity for, like, I was going to say the average person, but for a real person who's not Tom Cruise in a movie?
I think it's moving from toxic shame to healthy shame. Toxic shame is I'm a piece of crap. Okay. Like that's where he was, right? That's what he believes pretty much the whole movie until that moment. And then said, man, I'm in need of a family, and I've found a family, and now I'm going to go and be passionate about it. I think that's his shift.
So if we're going back to the 8 feelings, what's the message of shame? What's that alert?
I mean, toxic shame is...
Well, toxic shame is the impairment.
Yeah, so healthy shame is I have limitations, I'm human. Mm-hmm. And understanding I have limitations, I'm human. But that also says you are human and you have limitations as well. So it's a connection.
Yeah, I think one of the most powerful things in my own life, and I think you had such a big part in this, was understanding the message of shame, and that the gift of shame is humility, which leads to relationship.
That's right.
So like by me understanding my limitations, which when you feel shame, it's, the difference between shame and guilt, I am versus I do.
That's right.
So like when you feel shame, it's a message of I am, and you're dealing with that ceiling. You're dealing with that limitation, because it's oftentimes, when you first notice it, it is like a negative kind of self-talk.
Big time.
Oh gosh, I'm such a failure. I can't believe I didn't get that job. I can't believe I didn't pass that test. I'm so dumb. That kind of thing. And it's when you get to the impairment side, it's that toxic shame.
That's right.
Versus you lean into the gift, that humility. That humility can carry you into relationship with somebody by saying either, I'm so sorry for what's gone on, or I can't do this. Can you help me? And it establishes this connection, which, with somebody dealing with addiction, dependency, attachment, whatever, so much of that is I can handle it. I can handle it. I can handle it. I can handle it. So a lot of times people have said, well, the first step is admitting that, you can't, that you do have a problem.
That's right.
And that's so cliche, but it's so true, because that's the humility showing up.
That's right.
I can't do it. Can you help me?
That's right.
There's a part in the movie, he's in the village towards the beginning, and he walks up on these 2 young boys, and they have bamboo swords that they're fighting with. So one of them hands the sword to him, and he starts kind of fighting with this boy. And then one of the older samurais, one of the main lieutenants, comes up, and I mean, you want to talk about a mean mug? This guy is like burrowing holes in Tom Cruise with his eyes. No doubt. He picks up a bamboo sword and then just begins to like
beat the snot out of him, literally.
Thrash him. Yeah, and Tom Cruise keeps getting up. What did that scene say to you? because I was watching it and I literally said out loud, "Oh, Todd's gonna say this about that scene." So like, I'm really curious what you got out of it, and then I'll tell you what I thought.
Man, I thought that was his. I thought that was his pride and his addiction. Like, man, just be willing to take defeat, bro. Like, just you cannot hang with these guys, man.
Mm-hmm.
But his pride said, and I think it too. I think a piece of it was trying to prove himself that he belonged and mattered, right? And so he wanted to keep forcing him. Self-will run riot, right?
Yeah.
Trying to force his way to get up, and he was not willing to accept his limitations. Like he does not know how to use a sword.
Right.
That was obvious, but he was unwilling to surrender.
Yep, that's
He was
exactly
unwilling
what
to surrender.
I was watching it, and I said to Leigh-Ann, I was like, Todd's gonna say that this is the part where he should be surrendering.
Yeah.
That this is all about surrender. I thought a second thing too is that there were several times where I thought, I think he just wants to die. I think that there's several times in the movie, and we talked earlier about, if you don't have the fear going into battle, there's not the wisdom and it's all just rage. It almost seemed like, I wonder if it's his ability or his need to surrender, or if it's his, because he has that part where he's trying to prove to the American commander and the Japanese commander that these guys aren't ready. So he walks in front of a target and is shooting at this guy saying, "Shoot me, shoot me, shoot me." And he's even saying it to himself, "Just shoot me, just shoot me." And it made me wonder, is it demonstrating his need to surrender? And is it also he just wants to die and be out of his misery and not have to deal with it anymore?
I thought it was more like both of those, with the emphasis on the latter. Like, I think he was so miserable with himself, what he'd done, like just life. Like, he was looking for the easy way out.
Yeah. But I'm sure, and this is something that I know you would say personally, and I know both of us would say, with clients too. At the end, quote unquote, of his story, certainly the part of the story that we see, I'm sure that he would look back on that as a, lesson, or as a part of his story that was so integral in shaping who he became, in learning his limitations, and in learning that how he needs to reach for his connections in his community and ask for
Well, you
help.
see that, right? I mean, then one of the next scenes is him kind of sitting in the tall grass, just observing the samurai learn how to use a sword. And if you watch closely, it's like every time they go back to a sword scene, he's closer and closer and closer to learning how to use a sword, till finally he's up against...
He's jousting the same guy in practice,
That's right.
and these two guys are sitting over to the side betting on how many moves.
That's right.
Until eventually in the end you have this Rocky and Apollo moment where they both swing the sword, and it like both of them have the sword to the neck, and then the two guys betting go, "It's a draw."
Yeah.
And
that's where he learned, like, that's where the community, I think, learned respect for him.
Interesting. Yeah.
Like, man. But they had watched him for several, who knows, months, watching them learn how to use a sword.
Yeah.
Rather than being a know-it-all, because that's what he had gone to Japan to be. It was to be a know-it-all.
Yeah, and that, I think what's interesting there is that, and I asked this to Leigh-Ann earlier, is this a white savior movie? Like, is this Tom Cruise as a white guy coming into another culture and saving the day? And just as we're talking about this right now, which I mean, I'm a white guy, I can't say, for sure that kind of thing, but the thought I had was, we were just talking about the samurai teaching him how to use a sword, and I was going to say, and then I wonder if he was going to teach them how to use a gun, and he didn't. It wasn't him bringing something in that was going to save them. It was him coming in and them not bringing something to him, but him embracing what he found there, and then that saving him.
Well, I mean, that's the whole, the movie is The Last Samurai. It's not about, I always want to say Quasimodo, but that's not his name.
Katsumoto.
Katsumoto.
That's a mashup we could watch.
Yeah. It's It's about him being the last, Tom Cruise being the last samurai.
Oh, well, okay. So I read on IMDb before you came over. That's actually the plural of samurai in the title. So it's not talking about him as the last samurai, but their clan as the last. And then he's just
One of
the
them.
last person.
But if you remember what the name of samurai means.
Serve, to serve, yeah.
Yeah, to serve. So he goes to teach everyone, right? That's the whole reason to go to Japan, is to teach everyone, not to serve anyone.
Yeah. They said, we're going to give you $400 a week.
Yeah. Crazy. I'd do that now. It's the 2000s.
Your fourth job. I don't think that would be.
But he went to the last samurai. They served him and saved him. He didn't really do much for them.
Yeah.
If you think about it, I mean, he killed them all off, really.
Yeah.
Led them into battle they were going to lose.
Yeah. And then there's a part when they're getting ready to go to the battle where Katsumoto shows up and gifts him with a sword. And there's engraving on the sword. And Tom Cruise says, what does it say? And he says, I'm going to butcher this, the paraphrase, but he says basically that, you know, it says that you are a samurai who is the old combined with the new. And it was this like recognition of, you know, you're somebody that came in and melded your true self with our true self. So you're not the same person anymore. You carry with you that old person, but you're now a new person.
That's right.
You know, and I think that is just such a powerful, powerful theme, message, meaning that can be reflected. I mean, certainly in our jobs as therapists, in, you know, your current and my past job as a pastor.
And that's the First Corinthians, right?
Yeah.
They're new creations. That doesn't mean everything from the old is, I mean, it says the old is gone, but so much of who I am is who I was even prior to all that.
Well, and if you even think about the term recovery, you know, it's one of those words where when you're talking about it in regards to addiction, you kind of go, you know, you say it, but then, you know, if you stop and think about it, you're like, recovery from what? Recovery from sin, recovery from damage, recovery from trauma, recovery from dependency, recovery from, you know, all of the self-destroying things that we've become accustomed to doing, and recovery towards, you know, our true self, who we were really meant to be. And whether or not, you know, a person believes in God and says, you know, who God created me to be, certainly recovery towards, you know, who you can be as a person in the fullness of what that means.
That's right.
I've got a friend who, I have oftentimes said, you know, man, if there's ever anybody who would be a Christian, it's this guy. But he isn't and doesn't really want anything to do with that, but exhibits so many of the things that a Christian would, you know, and for him, I think he would say, you know, the same thing that's very similar. While he may not say, I want to be who God wants me to be, he would definitely say, I want to be a person who loves others. I want to be a person who respects people. I want to be a person who values life and values the people that I love and the things I've been given. And it's so many of these common values.
That's right.
That, you know, for you and I, we would say these are things that God has put into the world.
That's right.
These are truths that we believe to be self-evident. Yeah. But I think, you know, I don't have to have somebody else wear a Christian name tag to talk about those things that we have in common.
That's right.
Regardless of what they believe spiritually, I can say, you know, hey, these are both things that we agree on, and these are both things that, no matter, you know, what addiction or what your story has done to you, recovery says it's possible and there's hope to get back to these things.
That's right.
To recover from what's happened.
Yeah.
And one of the things, you know, you mentioned like way back at the beginning of our conversation that when you were mowing the grass, that you were listening to a podcast of a pastor out in Texas, Matt Chandler, and one of the things that that Chandler has put out, it started as a sermon series, it turned into a book. It's called Recovering Redemption, and I always kind of thought, I don't know this. I mean, you've talked to those guys. It seemed to me like a sneaky way to teach the 12 steps to people, because it was a 12-part series where he talked through the 12 steps, but he never once mentioned, hey guys, today we're talking about.
Yeah. So if the original series that was done for their recovery ministry, and it's called Recovery and Redemption, and it is recovering and redeeming the 12 steps. So that's, and then the series for the church came after that, like several years after that. So if you find the original Bible study, it's called Steps.
Yeah.
The original step study of Recovery and Redemption, it is a 12-step.
Is that what you used?
That's what we used.
Okay.
Yeah, so a lot of people have said that, like, and I'm like, yeah, because he didn't talk about that from the pulpit on a Sunday morning, but all that material comes out of their recovery ministry. Well, I think it was Thursday night.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's definitely 12-step.
Yeah.
But if you're a 12-step guy or girl, you'd listen to it and be like, this is totally the 12 steps.
Yeah.
And they did it on purpose.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
I think, and there's a book that Richard Rohr wrote called Breathing Underwater. Another book that you gave me there's so many books that I still use with clients that I could just point back to and be like, yeah, Todd told me about that. Including ones that you told me to read, and then I go back and talk to you, and I'm like, yeah, when it said this, and you're like, oh, I don't know, I haven't read it. I just thought that.
Sure. I've read bits and
You're like
pieces.
one of the only people that recommends books to me that you haven't read.
Yeah, not completely.
But like Breathing Underwater is like basically the 12 steps for non-addicts and how they can help
Right.
people who maybe aren't quote unquote in addiction, but there's so much goodness in the 12 steps if you embrace it. And as an example, in that book, he's got a definition of forgiveness that in my own story, and in my relationship with my dad, like just became so instrumental in us being able to kind of have some restoration and forgiveness between us. He says that forgiveness is no longer wishing for a different or a better past. And I remember just as I was kind of coming through my stuff, really struggling to kind of figure out what is forgiveness, what does it look like? And it's not to say that that's the totality of it, but I think that's certainly an Ebenezer, a mile marker that you can know I'm there.
That's right.
Where I can forgive somebody is when you can look back and go, I don't need the past to be different or
That's
better. Right. I can leave the past the same and still be whole.
That's right.
And that, that's from that Richard Rohr book, and so if there's anybody out there that wants to kind of engage in the 12 steps, but maybe going to a meeting or even being in a program isn't for you, I would say that's a great place to start is the book Breathing Underwater.
Yeah, those two books. And Recovery and Redemption to me is the greatest Christian book on the 12 steps that I've ever read.
Huh.
Gospel-centered 12 steps, I'll put it that way. I think Breathing Underwater is a great book. It's just not as gospel-centric as I would say Recovery and Redemption is.
Well, he's coming from a Catholic background too,
Yeah.
So it's a little bit different. But Rohr was somebody who, when I was first starting in therapy as a client that I read a lot of, mostly just read a lot of whatever you told me to read.
Yeah, that's funny.
What else from the movie? What else stands out from it?
I think going back to that forgiveness piece, there's a scene where he comes to the lady and asks for forgiveness for killing the husband, and she says, he did his job, you did your job. So we're not going to change the past, but I do forgive you. I think that nails what you're just talking about. That one small scene, if you remember that scene.
Yeah.
It's like, man, she very aware of what happened.
Do you think that that's her not dealing with her grief? Or is it just, this is a movie, we're given limited information, we don't see everything?
No, because you can see her deal with how mad she is, right? Because she goes and says, "Get him out of my house. I can't live like this anymore.
Yeah. I
want him. I want to kill him."
There's even a part where he sits down at the table and she says in Japanese something like he smells like,
Like the pigs.
Like,
Yeah,
I can't stand this or something like that.
Yeah, I think there's the scene where he is playing with the boys that changes her heart.
He's trying to teach him baseball.
That's right.
He hits the ball, and then they all run to him, and he's like, "No, you gotta
Yeah.
run for the ball. You gotta get the ball." And they're all just kind of, I mean, it's like whenever you see somebody and all these puppies run up to him, it's kind of that same.
Yep. And
They're
you
all
can
just
see
loving
there, like, they did a great job of showing the shift in her heart as he's nurturing and caring for her boys. There's a shift in her own heart, and I'm pretty sure the scene comes after that forgiveness scene comes after that shift.
Was it that Katsumoto asked her to care for him, or was it some kind of like honor bound thing that, like, because he killed the husband, that had to happen?
I think if I remember correctly, that's a great question, because his words are, "You have a duty."
Yeah.
But I'm not sure if the duty is because he told her to do it, or
Yeah.
if culturally she's. Until you asked that question, I thought it was a command from him to take care of her, but I never thought of it the other way. I don't know. That's a great question. That's why I love this movie. There's so many nuances of the movie.
Yeah, and I mean that's why I love like doing this show, is because there's so many things that the person I'm speaking with notices and brings out. There's things that, I'm sure that, the movies that my guests are picking, they've seen a million times, and maybe as a fresh set of eyes, I'm coming to it and seeing it and going like, hey, what about this? And like, oh my gosh. But there's also, the opposite. I think about when Jared and I talked about Warrior, I texted him watching it, and I was like, dude, I totally hate this movie. It's like, family drama to the last 15 minutes, and it's all punchy. And then he like texts me back a sentence, and I'm like, oh my God. And it just, my brain exploded, because he's just like, oh yeah,
he loves that movie.
What about the theme of needing to surrender and give in to the hurt to fully embrace the change and the relationship? And I'm like, oh my gosh, I love this movie now. Oh my God. Oh man.
Yeah, he does love that movie. But still not as good as Last Samurai.
Oh man.
Yeah, it's a great movie. And I love the way it ends. I love how it ends.
How's it end?
Well, it's the way I would have ended it. Like, there's 3 endings, right? He could have gone and died from his wounds.
You're saying there's 3 possible endings.
Yeah, so I like how they. Now, again, I don't know if that's how it really ended, or they're just showing us one of the 3 ways it ended. Mm-hmm. But I'm glad they showed it the way they showed it.
Well, how did they show it?
He goes back to the village and finally surrenders, and grabs his horse and goes back.
Well, here's what's interesting about that, and I'm glad that you brought it up and said it the way that you did. He goes back to the village and he finally surrenders. 2 weeks ago, Chris and I had a discussion about surrender when we were talking about A Star Is Born. So see, in the way that you're talking about it right now, in the end, he gets everything that he wants. He gets everything that he needs, and he finally gets the community and the family and the life and the meaning and the passion. But in the end, he finally surrenders, and he gets all of that stuff. So just by the context of what you're saying, so often we have the connotation surrender is giving up in the sense of I failed.
That's right.
But the way that you're talking about surrender doesn't sound like a failure. Can you talk more about that?
Yeah, I think it's finally living open-handed. Like, this is what has been given to me, and this is how I'm going to live within the way that, for me, contextually, God has called me to live, how to live, where to live.
Would you say it's acceptance? Is that a piece of it?
Totally. But, I mean, you think he could have gone back to America and been a hero.
They did offer him $500 a week or a month.
Yeah, and he said, forget it. That's where the surrender piece finally came, like, for him. So, yeah, I think he just, surrender was at peace. There was, the serenity prayer comes to mind, like change. Give me the courage to change that things, and the wisdom to know who I can change, and courage to know the difference between the two, and the wisdom to know the difference between, like, it just is a great scene. He's carrying his horse, going back to a dumpy village in the middle of nowhere that nobody knows in Japan, and becomes a nobody.
Yeah.
Nobody outside of that village, no one's ever going to know who he was. As where before, he was super famous.
Yeah. I think that's that interesting harkening back to that shift in identity. who does he want to be versus who is he really? And it's him getting to the place where he better understands who his true self is, and he gets to that place of acceptance. And I think the beauty in that is that the true self that he finds wasn't like a true self from 30 years prior in America. Certainly aspects of that person was in it, and it wasn't totally the true self that was in the Japanese village, but it was this beautiful marriage between the two.
That's right.
It's, who was I in the past, and reconciling ourselves with that, and, where am I at in the present, and how can I don't have a better word than accept, but how can I accept where I'm at,
That's right.
and almost like lean into it.
Just embrace it.
Yeah. I remember saying this to you on the phone one time. I used to describe myself as a time traveler because I said, and this was, 8-9 years ago, but like I used to say, I'm never in the present. I'm always either, reliving and glorifying something from the past, or I'm worried about something that's coming in the future, or could be coming, maybe is never coming, but certainly I'm convincing myself it could. And so much of my own personal work was learning how to be in the moment, how to be in the here and now, and really come to accept and realize that that's enough, like where I'm at, and not in like a settling way, but really fully embracing that it's not like I'm settling for it, but I'm realizing, I'm waking up to, I'm coming online to how full it is and how great of a gift it is of what I have in the present. True. And I think that that's kind of where he ended up in the end was, he reconciled his past, not that he was happy with it, not that he would do it that way over again, but he certainly accepted it, and he embraced where he was in the present.
Yeah.
Which I think is what anyone would say they would want to be at.
Big time.
And would it be fair to say that that's the primary work of therapy?
Oh, yeah. I would 100% agree with that. To be able to be totally present at the present.
Mm-hmm. And
have feelings about both the past and the future.
Yeah.
Right? Like, it's not like if I'm totally present, I'll have feelings.
Right.
I've got feelings about what happened to me in the past. And I have feelings about what could or couldn't happen to me in the future. But I don't allow those feelings to dictate or rob me of where I am currently.
Yeah, it's realizing my feelings aren't going to kill me.
That's right.
Because if we're talking about people struggling with addictions, it's still having those feelings, but being so afraid of having them that I've got to numb them up.
That's right. Got to get rid of them.
I've got to get rid of them. And I think that, a lot of people may have the misconception that if I go to therapy, by the time I quote unquote graduate from therapy, nothing's going to affect me. Like I'm going to be not made of stone, but like I'm going to be bulletproof. That's probably a better saying. And I think, something that I've told my clients before, and I never want to tell them this at the front end, but it's actually, you're going to get affected more. Like you're actually going to have more feelings about.
That's what I tell people almost, but I tell them that at the beginning of every first session. My goal, as you're setting your goals, I'll let you know mine, is to, my hope is by the end of this, whenever the end of this is, you will feel better. They give me this look. I said that you'll feel more sad. You'll feel more hurt. You'll feel more anger, lonely. Like you'll have a deeper experience of all the feelings. So you'll feel better.
Yeah. The emphasis isn't on the better. Not that you'll feel better, but it's that you'll feel better.
Yeah, but you got to put the emphasis on the better so they stick around.
Yeah.
But no, that was given to me in counseling, so I've used it. Like,
I'm totally gonna steal it now. That's great.
You will feel better. Like that's my hope.
Yeah, that you'll be able to experience your experience in your feelings will be of a higher quality.
That's right. You'll really live life.
You'll lean into them. You'll understand them and what messages they're giving you.
Yeah.
And which, I would say that's just part of the design of humans. It's how we are able to determine the quality of life that we have. Is where we place our feelings and our experience.
I think it's what Jesus said in John 10:10, I've come to give you life and life to the full.
The abundant life.
Yeah. You can only do that through feelings.
Yeah.
If you don't have feelings, we have no. I just heard this. If you haven't read the book, The Soul of Shame.
The Soul of Shame?
Yeah.
Okay.
It is.
Wait, is this one that you haven't read?
I'm in the middle of reading it.
Okay.
I'm in the middle of reading it. And he said today when I was listening to it on my drive to work, he talked about if we do not experience our feelings and feel our feelings, we'll have no movement. Our feelings is the thing that causes us to move.
Yeah.
And I was like, man,
it's
that
interesting
is
that
it.
you've said that. I don't know if you got a chance to listen to the one of these that we did, me and Terry did on Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind. But, you know, they get caught in this pattern. They end up erasing their memories, and they're going to repeat the pattern. And as we were watching it, Leigh-Ann was the one that clocked. The reason why they're repeating it is because they erase the hurt. It's the hurt that is the fuel for the vehicle of change that brings them to a different place. Because without the hurt, they just keep repeating the same things over and over. So it wasn't until they received their cassette tapes back and heard why the other was erasing the other, and they felt that hurt again. It wasn't until then that they got to choose a different action. They got to choose to break the pattern. And so I think you're absolutely right. You know,
I didn't say that's from the book. I cannot quote that.
Well, I think the book is absolutely right, and you were right to say it.
Dr. Kurt Thompson. Great. It's a phenomenal book.
Kurt, what?
Kurt Thompson, I believe, is the name.
Okay. Nice. I'll throw it into the description after.
It's a good book. He also wrote Anatomy of the Soul.
I've got that up here on the shelf.
That's his first book.
Maybe over here or up there. Yeah.
Yeah, that's his first one.
Somebody I worked with at the counseling center recommended that one. Oh, that's cool. Yeah. I have to add that to the list then. So Todd, let's say that. Well, no. Before we get to there, would you be okay with answering a question that somebody has written in as best you can?
As best I can.
As best you can.
I'll give it an A. A for effort.
I'll go ahead. I mean, this is a general question, but the question that we got is, how do I know when it's time to leave a relationship? Could be a dating relationship. I think in this context would probably, I don't know, it could be a marriage as well. But how do I know when it's time to leave a relationship?
So, based on conviction, I'll answer it this way.
And obviously the answer would be different for a marriage.
Yeah,
versus...
so marriage, I would say, that's between you and the Lord. To give an answer to that would be putting myself in the place of God, which I don't want to do, because He hates divorce. So
let's say
it's
in the context of not a marriage. Could be dating, could be friendship.
I would say it's time to leave the relationship when the relationship is becoming harmful. You'll know the relationship is getting harmful when there's not equal value in each other's story. The moment one person stops sharing story with the other person, it's time to leave the relationship, or is trying to control the story.
Tell me more about that. Like the moment that one person stops sharing story, what does that mean?
Like sharing struggle, sharing experiences, sharing hopes,
their heart,
desires, longings. Yeah, the moment that it begins to happen is the moment you're getting harmed. You're no longer getting hurt. You're getting harmed. Mm-hmm. The moment you get harmed is when we got to put up boundaries in relationships so that we don't have to get harmed. Mm-hmm. Boundaries are, fences are to keep what's inside safe. And so the person inside the fence has the key to let people in and out.
Yeah, this was something that I had a really big misunderstanding about what boundaries are until I had to do essentially a book report on it in the program. But boundaries, and a lot of people think boundaries are, you can't talk to me this way, which if that was a boundary, that's to keep people out.
That's right.
But what boundaries are for you, not the other person.
That's right.
So a boundary isn't, you can't talk to me this way, because they certainly can. I mean, like, they can
They
say
can,
whatever
they
want.
will, yeah.
A boundary is more like, when you talk to me that way, I feel hurt. And so if you continue to talk to me that way, I won't be in relationship with you. It's really saying, here's what I need and expect from you.
Right.
And if I don't get it, then we can't be in relationship.
Yeah, that's right.
And so I think from what I'm hearing you say is maybe, it's time to leave a relationship when, that other person is maybe crossing those boundaries. And so I think, what I would add to that is it requires a little bit of self-awareness, because you got to realize, what do I need, and what do I want from this relationship, and am I getting it? And I think, two, it requires a little bit of humility, because you have to be able to say to yourself and to the other, this is what I need. That's and right. This is what I expect. And if I'm not getting it, then I can't be in this relationship. Yeah. And I think, those two things, they aren't common commodities, unfortunately. Self-awareness and humility. No. There's, I know that for a lot of certainly all of my college experience, I didn't have either one of those.
Yeah, me either.
And so, I think it's, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, so you weigh into, but like, it's time to leave a relationship. And we're not talking about a marriage here, but it's time to leave a relationship when, the other person is harming you by crossing boundaries that you have, either maybe for yourself or for any relationship right. that you're in.
But you'll have to have the self-awareness to know what your boundaries and needs are.
Yeah. Yeah.
But so many people are so hungry for relationship. Mm-hmm. They become, so needy, but it's not really neediness, it's codependency. So we stay in relationships way longer than we need to for our own emotional health, because we're so codependent.
Yeah.
So, we'll stay in it and stay in it and stay in it, because we're too terrified to get out, because we're afraid that we won't ever find another one.
Yeah. Yeah, I've had to ask people that question several times, like, that's what I figured. Siri agrees.
Thank you, Siri. She's awesome. It's
always good to have affirmation at your fingertips.
Yes.
Yeah. Just, I'm not really feeling it. You're so right. Thank you, Siri. Appreciate it.
Yes, Siri.
I've had to ask somebody a tough question before, like, hey, is there any piece of this that may be coming from you don't think there's anybody else out
That's
there,
right.
and you'll never do any better? And I know there's always the line, there's more fish in the sea. I don't like that, because that focuses on this external whatever. I would say I would want to lean more into, let's talk about how much you're valuing
That's
yourself. Right. Let's talk about how much you're worth and how much, value you have, and how, do you feel like this other person is recognizing that, and I like to use the word stewarding it, because I feel like one of the things, this is part of my story. This is a part of the story where you have had such a big hand in as well. When I was getting to the place where I was going to tell Leigh-Ann I love her for the first time, like, you and I went out to lunch at Edley's, and I remember like sitting there and telling you, hey, this is why I wanted to go out with you, because I'm trying to weigh this, and I just need, because so many times in the past I just had no idea what love was. I just need somebody to look in and say what they see in this, and do they believe that what I'm experiencing, what I'm putting out, is love. And you asked me a question, and you just said, can you accept the love she has for you? And I remember sitting at Edley's and just immediately breaking down crying at the table.
Yeah.
And part of that is because, A, just realizing how much my wife loves me, or girlfriend at the time, but B, also realizing how carefully and how with honor, passionately and lovingly she stewards my story. She stewards my heart.
Yeah, big time.
And just really, I think in that moment, and not just in that moment, but certainly a lot of it just coming together, coming into the fullness of the understanding of what that was.
Yeah.
And so, when it comes to saying, the other person not sharing story, I think of it, how are they stewarding your heart?
Right.
How are they stewarding that relationship with you? And if you feel like they're doing it very carelessly and very thoughtlessly, then I would say, and without us knowing where the person that wrote this question is in their story, maybe they're at a place where it's still enough time to have a conversation and say, this is what I'm thinking, this is what I'm feeling, or maybe this is kind of a last straw scenario, but wherever they're at, because I think it is possible if you can be courageous enough and brave enough to be vulnerable and take your feelings and say, hey, I feel like we're experiencing a disconnect.
Yeah.
And this is what I'm experiencing. This is what I need. Can you give that to me? I think that there's potential the relationship could be healed and move forward.
That's right.
And that's certainly the humility piece, but it also may be at the place where you've tried that many times and it's just time to step out because you've come into the realization that this person doesn't steward my heart well.
No, that's a great way to put it, Josh. If they're not willing to steward your heart, then they're not willing. They don't deserve your heart.
Yeah. I remember talking to you about, feeling like my relationship with Leigh-Ann was this like Fabergé egg, this like precious, incredibly valuable thing that I was scared to death to hold in my hands, that I was going to like mess up something and drop it and break it. And as I look back, we've talked a lot about leaning into the feelings and realizing what those alerts were. So that's a lot of fear that's leading to a lot of wisdom and a lot of faith.
That's
and,
right.
It led me to a place of realizing what exactly it is that I had, and it allowed me to realize what I wanted to do with it.
Yeah.
And what I was going to do with
That's
it.
right. And you took the risk.
Yeah. Yeah.
And now look what the risk got you.
Yeah.
So true.
It got me a wife and a dog in the room right behind us that have graciously cooped themselves up for our entire
That's awesome.
entire talk. So let me ask you this. Let's say that somebody's listening to this episode and they just feel like they could really connect with you and they want to see you as a client. How can they get in touch with you?
Yeah, just go on to 10manministries.org.
10manministries.org.
That's right.
Okay.
And you'll find my bio on there and just click the book an appointment.
There you go.
Yeah.
I love it. Well, Todd, thank you so much for coming and doing this. It has literally been just the best thing in the world. I love it.
Totally. It's good to be here. I'm glad we didn't strike out on this one. 3 strikes we would have been out. No.
I wondered this morning when I got up, I was kind of like looking at the phone going like, is he going to text me? Like, what's going to happen?
No, not today. No, it's been a pleasure. And again, like we were talking about, man, 19 years. Like,
yeah.
How many people can say they have a best friend, which I would say you're my best friend for 19 years. It's
Dude.
crazy.
Yeah.
And man, we could have a 3 or 4 episodes on our friendship alone.
Absolutely.
So yeah, I appreciate you and appreciate what you're doing, and grateful for the work you're doing here in Nashville and helping people. And man, what I can tell, you've never been my therapist, but you do great therapy, great work. So
well, thank you.
Yeah. If you're listening to this podcast, I would defer you to Josh before I'd say come to me. So.
Well, I think that one of the beauties of this is that people can certainly get a sense of who the different people that come on the show are as therapists. And I think one of the greatest things about therapy is that it's a therapeutic relationship that really the work takes place
That's
in.
Right.
And so there are people out there that could have an incredible therapeutic relationship with you. And there are different people that can have an incredibly therapeutic relationship with me. And I think, I know that Chris 2 episodes ago talked about, process of finding a therapist. It's a process. And if it doesn't work out with one, it could work out with another. So
Totally.
you gotta seek that out. So, well, thank you so much for being here.
No, thanks for having me on. It's been a pleasure.
I love you. You're my brother.
Amen.
And I couldn't do any of this without you.
No, same way.
So thank you so much.
No, great to be here.
Okay, so just in case any listeners want an update, we are officially on day 18 of Whole30, which I would say the hell part of it was at the very beginning. I don't think we've hit, or if there is a heaven, but we're certainly in a purgatory.
Ooh, we are supposed to be in the middle of tiger blood.
Listen, I have said before, tiger blood is what Charlie Sheen said that he had after he had been diagnosed with HIV and was in the middle of a coke-fueled, breakdown.
Well, maybe he felt really good, and that's also how we're supposed to feel.
Maybe, but I don't know if I want to feel as good as he was when he was on TV.
I have felt good. I felt good since day 5.
That makes one of us.
You haven't felt bad.
I haven't, but it definitely took a lot longer than day 5.
No, it didn't.
Yes.
I feel like the first 2 days were bad, and then after that, it's been kind of okay.
We're all allowed our own experience. Hey, Leigh-Ann.
Hi.
You listened to the episode.
I sure did.
Yeah. And people of the world are thirsty for your thoughts. So if you could please spill the tea.
Ooh, I like what you did there. Tea being a drink and the people being thirsty.
Well, I'm a master wordsmith. What can I say?
You are. A of all, I love this movie. It kind of reminds me of my brother. We watched it growing up some.
It's true. Your brother was a samurai.
No. I just mean that I liked to watch movies with him growing up, and this is one of the ones that I watched purely because he was my brother and he wanted to watch it. A lot of things in my life are because Jeffrey wanted to watch that, so that's what we watched.
That's true. Do you think that Jeffrey listens to the podcast?
I don't think so.
I don't think so either, and I'm really disappointed by that. Oh. I think that we should get him and Hannah on board.
I can send him this episode and tell him to listen. Or the Wonder one, because I talked about him in that one too. He would really like that one.
We had this discussion when we were driving somewhere one night. We got to get a name for the audience.
Ooh.
Like Dax Shepard calls his audience the Armcherries.
Yeah, I really like that.
I don't know. We need something that we can refer to people by.
Theater goers.
That's so long.
Audience
members. There's
members.
So many consonants.
I don't know. His involves food, so we could think of something like that.
I don't think it involves food. I think
Armcherries.
Yeah, but
they put little cherry emojis when they say it on
okay.
social media.
Well, listen, I mean, we can maybe even ask for suggestions. So if you're listening and you're in the audience and you have an idea for what you'd like to be called, email in at therapisttheater@gmail.com or give us a little tweet on the tweeter at therapisttheater THTR. Let us know. At us. That's a thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's what the kids do. Youths. So, but you were saying you loved this movie.
Yeah, I hadn't seen it in a long time, so I loved watching it, and I don't care what Todd says, I really like Tom Cruise. Mission Impossible, give me that all day long. He is a great actor, and he's always actiony and kicking people's butts.
He runs so much.
He does.
He has a great cardio.
He does. He has a good running face too.
Yeah, and he makes his hands into blades.
Yes.
While he runs.
Yes.
If there's any professional runners out there, please write in and tell us if there's a reason why the hands are made into blades.
Is it aerodynamics? One time when I was running in middle school, somebody came up to me and told me to stop and then made me stop and look at what my hands were doing because I was holding them just loosely. So it kind of looked like they were just flopping around. And from then on, every time I run, I hold my fist. I put my hands into fists and run like this.
Is this like a Phoebe and Friends run? Is that what's happening?
I don't think so, but I guess it did look weird because somebody stopped me to tell me.
I feel like if you make
your hands... It made me so self-conscious.
I think if you make your hands into fists, that's... I'm just picturing you running towards me with your hands in the fist form and how terrified I would be.
Yeah, but I think it would look weirder if I did the blades.
Well, I think
Tom.
in one sense, you're in a hurry to punch someone. And in another sense, you're constantly karate chopping.
I was going to say I'm in a hurry to karate chop. What's
Yeah.
the in between? What do your hands do when you run?
Well, first, I don't run. So that's the thing. I feel like in an evolutionary way, I have evolved past the need to run. Like,
Wow.
unless there is an animal chasing me to eat me,
Mm-hmm.
you know, because at this point I'm at the top of the food chain.
Yeah.
So, like,
Except for with bears.
well, there's not a lot of bears
sharks.
in Nashville. But second off, there is no second off. I just don't run.
All right. Well,
Yeah.
anyways.
I put them out in front of me like I'm Superman, and I run. I run like that.
Interesting.
And the whole time I yell as loud as I can. Dun, 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 dun.
It's amazing that you haven't taken off at this point.
Well, it's true. Yeah.
All right. So onward to this part of the episode.
Thanks, Mr. Schultz.
Um,
Howard Schultz, Onward. Starbucks.
Oh, the
we worked
book.
for that company,
know,
and they
I
gave us a
never-
free copy of the book.
I didn't read the book.
I read the book.
Are you going to vote for him for president?
Absolutely not.
Okay. So I watched the movie, loved it. And then I also listened to the episode. Loved that too. Love Tom Cruise. Sorry, Todd. Now on to what you guys talked about. So I had a real moment of something deeply hitting me in the heart when Todd made the comparison of himself to worn out Velcro. He said that he was like worn out Velcro in the sense that he... Thanks for the sound effects. That sounds like good Velcro.
That's true. This is the opposite of worn out.
So worn out Velcro. He said he was like worn out Velcro in the sense that he was made to attach to something, but just like wasn't able to get it right or wasn't able to make it work. And I honestly like stopped where I was for a minute just because I loved it so much. Like it just is such a good depiction of how like we are all Velcro. Okay, stop with the Velcro. Just that like we're literally made to have connections with each other and to build attachments with other human beings and to have attachments to like our family members and things like that. And just how, you know, childhood wounds or being hurt either beginning or later in life, how much that can impact you to where it's just like Velcro. It's not that you're a bad person. It's not that you can't get relationships right. It's not that, you know, it's not that there's something wrong with you. It's just that because of what the world has given you and because of the things that have happened to you or because of the ways, you know, that you've been injured in attachment.
Traumatized.
Like maybe your little Velcro hooks are just worn down. And so they're not able to connect with another little Velcro piece.
Yeah.
And wow, like what a powerful picture. And like, I just loved that.
Same girl.
And then also you guys both kind of talked about this, about like, everybody being addicted to something. And like, he made the point that, you know, people might call it different things. Like, and he said Christians call it idolatry. And I just think you guys are so right. And that's why I think therapy is so valuable. And like, I feel like I've learned a lot about the 12 steps just from you learning a lot about them. And like that being kind of your specialty, like it's sort of through osmosis. Like I've just learned just by being in your vicinity. And as much as I've learned, it seems like there's so many principles that apply to just humans, like not just addicts. I mean, certainly addicts, but there's principles that everybody could apply to their life. And yeah, I just think like, even if it's not, you know, a substance or something that's like addictive, you know, scientifically or traditionally, you could still have stuff in your life that you're using to kind of fill emotional gaps in your life.
Dependency. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Like Whole 30, speaking of which, that a lot of that is about learning your emotional dependence on food. And I have felt that. I mean, we just talked about this a couple minutes ago, just that the other night I had an emotional day, and like when we got on the couch at night just before we went to bed to watch something, I 100% in my head was like, oh, I really want one of those like there's a sweet little like it's not a granola bar.
Lara bar.
Yeah, but I mean, what would you call a Lara bar?
I would say it's just like
Energy
a little
bar?
snack bar. I don't know if I'd say it's energy or protein, but I mean, I think it's Whole30 compliant, and most of the types of them, no matter what flavor, are made of like dates and almonds. And then there's usually like another natural flavor. Like the one I think we've liked the best so far has been apple pie, which feels like they lightly brushed some apple flavor across the top of this thing.
Yeah.
So like,
it's like fruit and nuts basically.
yeah.
But it's sweet, and like when you're on Whole30, it legit, like it's like I mean, it's good.
Yeah.
So all that to say, I really wanted one, and I realized as I was wanting it that like, oh, it's just because I feel emotionally exhausted and I want sugar. Like I want something to eat.
Which I gotta say, they're good, but they're not that good. So to be in a place where you're like, I want one of those.
That's just where we're at.
Yeah.
But all that to say, it's just an example. Like even food can be a dependence.
It's true.
If it's, if you're using it for an emotional need.
And I think as a comparison, on that same night before we got on the couch when we were walking the dog, I said to you, I would give anything to have 3 Little Debbie oatmeal cream pies stacked on top of one another that I could just shove into my mouth at once and eat. So that just lets you know what kind of people we both are, guys.
Was that because of an emotion you were feeling?
Well, I was lonely for Little Debbie oatmeal cream pies. That's what I was feeling.
Oh boy. So another thing, no, I think like right around that same time in the episode, you talked about society or parents or whoever it is, without meaning to, can kind of teach us to emotionally to push down our emotions.
I think I even said they grind the emotions out of us.
Ooh, yeah, that's a good phrase. Like the quote that you had was like, don't be sad, which I feel like at some point, I guess I can't say everyone, but I'm sure a lot of people have said that at some point in their life without meaning to tell someone to like numb their emotions, but that's what it does. And it's because that's what society at large teaches us is best, to like not show emotions that might make you weaker, or to not cry, to not let people see you cry.
Well, why do you think that it does that?
Why do I think what does what?
Why do you think that like society, other people at large, try to grind those out of us?
Well, I don't always think it's intentional. I think
most of the time it's not.
Yeah, like I think at this point maybe it's something that, this is probably not the answer you're looking for, but like I think at this point it's been so ingrained that people are uncomfortable with emotions. And so that's the response that they've been taught. Mm-hmm. And I don't know why it would have started. Like,
I think that is still a symptom of it. I think it's still like a result. My best guess is that it's, if we as a person are not able to fully deal with our emotions, then when we're in the presence of somebody experiencing emotions, we cannot deal with theirs and we can't help them deal with it. So like if I, as a dad, which I'm not, am uncomfortable and aren't able to feel or deal with my sadness, and my kid comes up to me and is sad over something, then I'm not going to lean in, metaphorically, and try to help them process through their sadness, especially if it's over something that maybe me as an adult doesn't think is worthy of sadness.
Yeah.
Which, let's face it, an emotion that a kid is having may not be caused by the same thing that an emotion that an adult is having. You and I may be sad because, I don't know, a relationship was severed or an opportunity didn't work out. And a kid may be sad because their favorite stuffed animal got ripped up in the wash.
Yeah.
And we may think, well, that's not worthy of sadness. But to that kid, that stuffed animal could be the world. And so if they're sad over that stuffed animal and I don't have the ability to deal with sadness, then I may say, oh, well, don't be sad. We'll get you another one. And I just try to glaze right over that opportunity for them to understand and engage in their own heart more.
And they just learned I shouldn't be sad about things. I
And-
shouldn't express my sadness.
Right. And I've skipped over the opportunity to teach my kid how to grieve,
Yeah.
which I think as adults, grieving is something that hardly any of us know how to do.
Yeah.
And that so many of us need to do over things.
I wonder if, like, going back to the kind of the wondering of like why society's like this or why this is the way it is. If it, I mean, it's a protection thing. Like, if something hurts, you know, we don't want to be hurt again, or we don't want to hurt more. So I'm sure it's a trait that we've learned as we've also learned to hurt each other more, like as humans. And as we've gotten more technology and stuff like that. So Dax Shepard talks a lot about this. Like, he talks about as societies progress and how we used to be in these small little communities that were like hunter-gatherer things. And now all of a sudden we have all these conveniences. And so we have time. Like, we're not out providing for our family until sundown and then come back and sleep. And so there's more time, and so there's more human interaction, and so maybe there's just been more hurts, and then because of that, people have stuffed stuff
Well, I think
more.
there's a family legacy element to it as well. Like, if, you know, I can't deal with my sadness and I don't teach my kid how to do it, my kid grows up and they don't know how to deal with theirs, and they have a kid, and it just keeps getting handed down. So, I mean, I think so much of what, you know, our work as right now a married couple who doesn't have kids is how do we deal individually with our own emotions? How do we learn to engage them more? How do we learn to engage each other's emotions more so that when little Teresa's little saplings do come along, you know, how would they learn?
They wouldn't.
They wouldn't.
They'd be lost.
Yeah,
little
and then they would just
Teresas.
pass it down and pass it down and pass it down. So.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's a shame.
Good
But
thing
at
we're-
some point you gotta, I mean, you have, this is something that I think I would love for the world to understand is you can break the cycle.
Oh yeah.
It's
for
not an
sure.
unstoppable force that you have no agency or say in. Like, if you're willing to do the hard work of learning how to engage with your own heart, and you're willing to do the harder work in allowing yourself to be vulnerable and having intimacy with the ones you care about, then it is possible to break that cycle.
And it's hard, but it's really worth it. Like, it's
Yeah.
better.
Absolutely.
Yeah. The last little thing is just that you guys at the end, so you and I talked about, like, you asked me after we watched the movie if that was a white savior movie, and you talked to Todd about it. And I think when you guys were talking, I just had like one extra thought, because I still really don't know. I still don't. I think you guys are right in that I guess it's not, because, like.
Well, I don't think that either one of us was trying to put a definitive stamp on that. I just
Yeah,
think,
I know.
And I think we're at a not a disadvantage, but like
Yeah,
we're certainly at a
disadvantage.
privileged point where, as to heterosexual, white, cisgendered, like males, you know, for us to discuss what is and is not a white savior movie, problematic. But
Yeah. Which same. I mean, I'm white, so I mean same. But I still think there's an ability to like you should be
it's
able
true.
to
And
recognize what it is.
I think as
and
best we could, we landed on we didn't think it was.
yeah, that's what I was saying. So like, which I think I agree with. And yeah, so I just what I thought when you guys were talking was that, you know, yes, he does come and the samurai kind of save him and help him, but like he also he's kind of set up as like he has to bring the strategy to the Japanese.
Mm-hmm.
And then even with the samurai, he kind of brings like a war strategy to them and kind of like gears them up for battle. And in that last scene, like there's a whole, you know, he kind of has helped them plan out this whole strategy to win that last battle. So I don't know. That was like an only extra thought. And
well, here's an extra wrinkle. They actually didn't win the battle.
But he, yeah, which I think they all knew they wouldn't win, but he helped them strategize so that they wouldn't be like just right off the bat, you know, crushed, so that they'd have a fighting chance. Anyways, all of that is to say just that like there was a little bit of him being like, oh, this white person has to come teach them how to do stuff. But I also, you know, the samurai taught him a lot too. And I just think, I mean, if anything, it was at least white centered. Like it was very much just centered around this white man in this foreign country, but he was kind of held up to be the hero, which I think is a little, I don't know, maybe problematic. But that's all. And I think that all goes back to like, I mean, you talked about that Katsumoto. I loved when Todd almost called him Quasimodo. I laughed so hard out loud, like outside. It was embarrassing a little bit, but I thought it was so funny.
Which, I mean, I don't know if there's a way for us to come down definitively on it, but I think what's interesting is, you know, white savior element being present or not, that at least Todd told me this, you know, when he initially picked the movie, one of the things that it just beautifully demonstrates is interdependence.
Yeah.
Because where, you know, Tom Cruise at, which I've noticed anytime we talk about a movie that he's in, I don't know if we've ever remembered a character's name that he plays. It's just Tom Cruise.
I actually,
it's a Tom Cruise movie.
I don't know this one.
Yeah.
I forgot it already.
But like where he's at the beginning of the movie, yes, he gets captured, but from the things they teach him about honor and dependence and relationship and purpose, you know, he's able to grow as a person and become healthy from the things that he teaches them about where he comes from in his culture and strategizing and war and things like that. They are able to grow as a people as well. And so I think it's important to recognize potential pitfalls in a movie, but B, it at least seems like with this movie that they made a concerted effort to demonstrate that there wasn't a culture depicted in the movie that was better than the other. Like there were two cultures present that were equal and that could contribute to each other's. Now, America in the movie was certainly more industrious and were providing things to the Japanese in the movie, weapons that they didn't have, but that it didn't seem like that was positioned as we're of a higher status, especially in the end when the emperor makes his choice to not sign a treaty. So I think
you're right.
To
and I like that that's even like a question though. I just think that might be important to just acknowledge in a lot of the movies that we're watching, just the need for diversity and kind of acknowledging that they might not get it all right. But great movie, great episode.
Yeah.
You and Todd are BFFs, and it's great. It's great to listen to.
I just, you know, like I said on there's a small list of people that have had the biggest impact on my life, and you're one of them, and he's one of them, and I can't imagine, you know, doing anything like this without having his voice and fingerprints on it, which really anything I do is going to have his fingerprints on it just because of the impact he's had on my life. And so, you know, he said toward the end that it was an honor for him to be on.
It's an honor to be on that list.
Yeah, and I feel a little, I don't know. I mean, embarrassed, maybe. Not that he would say that, but just in the sense of he has just contributed so much that it is just a giant honor for me, and I'm just so thankful for him that he is my best friend and that he came on the show and that he's just willing to partner up with me and throw some love and some wisdom and some understanding out there that people can hear it.
Yeah, well, it's an honor to be at the list and to be part of your life and to get to cheer you on.
Nice. It is nice. Yeah. Well, I mean, thank you.
Nice. You just said this like heartfelt thing.
Nice.
Nice.
It's like that episode of Parks and Rec where April says, I love you, and Andy says, awesome sauce.
Awesome sauce.
Yeah. Well, I didn't mean to minimize it, but I just...
No, you're fine.
I also don't want... Like, I kind of wondered, like, oh, gosh, when I was recording with Todd, are people going to think this is really sappy, that we're, like...
Whatever. Don't be ashamed of your emotions. We
I'm
just
not...
talked about this.
Yeah. Yeah, you're right. You're
right.
Yeah.
You guys have a great connection and holy cow, 19 years.
Yeah. We are really old.
Also, how rare is that two dudes can just love on each other and be best friends and like be in touch with their emotions in that way and have as cool of a connection as you guys? It's rare. Let me close it out because you're struggling with all this love. I can tell.
We're like unicorns.
You are. All right, come on.
Even though we're not Nashville natives. I did want to say this. If there's anybody listening that would like to contribute to the conversation on whether on the white savior issue, I would love to hear from you.
Yeah,
please. Write in therapisttheater@gmail.com or Twitter @therapisttheater, THTR. I would love to hear more about what you're thinking. Also, keep writing those listener questions in. Those are great. therapisttheater@gmail.com. We're going to bring the lights back up, and at least for this week, the theater is closed.